Hello, educators. My name is Erin Linsenbigler, and I'm here to talk to you today about 4 key concepts in education. Now, these 4 key concepts are all going to go together to help your students get the most out of their educational needs. The first key concept we are going to talk about today is adaptive assessment. Now, adaptive assessments are important because it helps the child find their zone of proximal development, which we are also going to talk about later. Adaptive assessments modify themselves as the student is taking it to get to the student's level so they're not frustrated or bored while they are taking this assessment. This assessment is going to help you see if a student is below grade level, at grade level, or above grade level. So if a student is taking this test and say they're starting to get frustrated, the questions are too hard and they're getting the questions wrong, the test or assessment itself is going to modify itself and make these questions easier or make them lower leveled so the student feels like they're doing better, and it doesn't make them frustrated while they're taking the assessment, and you'll get to see where that student is at compared to the rest of your students. If a student is working on this assessment and the questions are too easy and they're getting bored, they might start clicking, that assessment is going to modify itself so they're getting harder questions or higher level questions so you can see how much higher above the rest of the students that student itself is while taking the test. The next term we're going to talk about is called an RIT score. Now, an RIT score is kind of the same regardless of the grade level or level at which the student is testing at. If a student tests, say, the score of 170, and by the end of the year, they're at 190. Well, that means they've gained 20 points, or 20, however the scale that you're judging on is going. That means they've gained 20 points. Say somebody tested at 360 and tested out at 380, well, that same student also gained 20 points. So it's showing you how much each student is gaining based on just their individual scores alone. The next concept we're going to talk about is called the zone of proximal development. Now, like we just talked about during the adaptive assessment, you don't want your students to feel bored or frustrated. That's where the zone of proximal development comes into play. So we all know what we can do and our comfort zone. That's what we like to do, we're comfortable with, we know we can do it independently. So say you're a first grade teacher and you know that a student can count to 20, no problem by themselves, right? Maybe they're able to add 1-digit numbers, right? That's what they're comfortable with. That same student is not going to be able to multiply 2-digit numbers. That would be way too hard and out of their frustration zone. So we are looking for that common ground, this white can do with help. That's what the zone of proximal development is. That's what adaptive assessments are going to help you find, and that's where you want to work with the student while you're doing group work or while you're doing your small reading groups or small math groups. You want to work in that can do with help. That's going to help students feel more confident because they might not think they're able to do it on their own, and maybe you just sitting there or giving them a little guidance while they're doing these problems. That's that zone of proximal development. The can do with help. That is your sweet spot with students. That is what you want your students to be able to do. That can do with help. That's where you want to be working. Our fourth and final term that we are going to talk about today is called normative data. Now, normative data compares similar students of similar groups, and these groups are on the larger scale. So think of it as a giant measuring stick to see how a student is doing compared to their peers within the district or nationally, okay? They take these national scores and compare them to how your student is doing, where they should be, and maybe where they're at, okay? So for example, if a student's RIT score places them in the 50th percentile, that means they're doing better than 50% of students at the same grade level who took the test during the same time. Same with if they're in the 75th percentile. That means they're doing better than 75% of the students who took that test at the same time. So with that being said, our math growth MAP growth assessments are designed to adapt to the student. Okay, that's the adaptive assessment part. They provide a clear measure of the student's progress over time, and that's their RIT score, that score of where they maybe started at the beginning of the year. You could test them again at the middle of the year, and at the end, and seeing that growth over time for themselves individually. And then they're working within their optimal learning zone, which is their zone of proximal development, okay? And allow for you to analyze that data with the normative data on how they're doing compared to their peers, either in school or nationally. So, in conclusion, the adaptive assessment, RIT score, and the zone of proximal development all go together with that normative data, and you can see how the student is doing as a whole.